So you just got home from the Apple store. You're carrying the shiny new iPad Pro, the ultra thin, ultra powerful work of marvelous genius and ingenuity that only the folks at Apple could ever design. Well, of course, one of your first concerns should be, will your iPad Pro become bent? This year, the iPad Pro is even more powerful, but more importantly, it's even thinner. So thin, in fact, you need to be concerned about whether or not it will bend from daily normal use. And on that note, we have 10 helpful tips for you that just brought home your shiny new $1,400, $1,500 iPad Pro. And we'll even have some helpful tips for you if it does become bent. Hint, pay us more money. Tip number 1. Whenever you unbox your iPad Pro, be sure to always double check that it is not already bent. In fact, we have shipped many of our iPad Pros pre-bent, so you'll always want to double check. Tip number 2. It is highly advised that you use the iPad Pro on a solid surface, preferably the same surface that you unbox the iPad Pro on, as this doesn't require you to move the device. Now, we encourage you to rarely move it, but if you do, we encourage you to do it as infrequently as possible. Now, you'll want to be careful not to put anything heavy on your iPad, such as some Skittles. This very well may bend your iPad, and Apple will not cover this under warranty. Tip number 3. When carrying or using the iPad Pro, always use 2 hands. This is a bad example. Never carry or use the iPad Pro with one hand, as this can cause an uneven distribution of weight, which may bend your iPad. Tip number 4. Never carry your iPad Pro in the crook of your arm. As temptingly convenient as your armpit is, it is an unfortunately curved area of your body.
Disclaimer, Apple is not responsible for bent iPad Pros that were bent during armpit traversal.
Tip number 5, never count on a case to prevent your iPad Pro from bending, as the case will likely bend before the iPad Pro does, according to our Apple reps at least.
Cases alone, I will say, are great for impact protection. They're not great for bend protection, as most of them are made of plastic or some other material that bends sooner than aluminum does. Any sort of sustained force on a device that would cause a bend would bend the case first before it bends the device.
I see.
Tip number 6, under no circumstances should you put your iPad Pro in a backpack. It may become bent by the other objects in said backpack, and this is especially true even if you put it in a protective sleeve and a protective area of said backpack.
I had an appointment for the Apple support for my iPad.
Yeah, what's going on with it?
It's bent.
Okay.
Big iPad Pro. Nothing. It's just normal use, everyday wear and tear. I never did anything that made it like
Backpack or anything?
I mean, I keep it in a backpack, but it's in a protective sleeve inside the backpack.
Tip number 7, we've designed the iPad Pro to register the lightest of touches. So if you wish for your iPad Pro to remain unbent, we recommend tapping as light as possible. Tip number 8, if your iPad does become bent from typical, normal, ordinary use, know that Apple will not cover or replace it even during your normal warranty period. We will blame you for carrying the device in your backpack, tapping too hard, or perhaps not carrying the device with 2 hands at all times. But don't worry, fixing your bent iPad is as simple as turning it into us and paying us a small repair fee of just $499.
The regular replacement flat rate for an iPad Pro 11-inch model is $499.
Tip number 9, if you're thinking about purchasing our ultra-thin, ultra-powerful iPad Pro, we highly recommend taking a look at our accidental coverage warranty called Apple Care Plus. Not only will you have the joy of paying a large entry fee, but if your device happens to be bent from ordinary daily use, we will charge you an additional fee on top of that for each repair, limited to only 2 repairs though. Tip number 10, lastly and most importantly, if you did recently purchase an iPad Pro within the last 14 days, we highly recommend you return it. If 14 days have already passed, we highly advise you to sell this piece of junk on Craigslist as soon as possible before used iPad Pro prices plummet. Now we hope you found these tips helpful and that you use your wonderful, ultra powerful, ultra thin and bendable iPad Pro primarily in a stationary situation. Always use 2 hands, tap very lightly, and remember, never put your iPad Pro in a backpack.